The wind came down from the mountains like something with teeth. It bit through the wool of her coat, found the gaps in her boots, curled around her neck and made her skin prickle. She stood on the porch of the ranch house, one hand shading her eyes, watching the sky turn the color of old bruises. Snow was coming. She could smell it in the air, taste it on the back of her tongue. The kind of storm that buried fences and made the world disappear. She'd lived through worse. She'd lived through everything. Her name was Evelyn, though most people in town just called her the widow, if they called her anything at all. She'd been married once to a man named Thomas, who'd bought this land with dreams bigger than his pockets, and a heart that gave out before he turned 50. He'd left her the ranch, the debts, and a surname that didn't quite belong to her. She wasn't white enough for the church ladies, wasn't native enough for the reservation women. She existed in the space between, a woman without a tribe, without a place. She'd learned to live with it, learned to live with a lot of things. She turned back toward the house, ready to bolt the doors and wait out the storm, when she saw them. Two figures moving through the snow, one on horseback, one on foot. The horse was laboring, its head low, and the man leading it was built like a wall, broad and solid, his hat pulled low against the wind. But it was the figure draped across the saddle that made her breath catch. A woman, small and still, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her body limp. Evelyn didn't think. She moved. She crossed the yard in a run, boots crunching through the snow, and reached them just as the man stopped. Up close, he was even bigger, with a jaw like carved stone and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't speak. He just looked at her. And in that look was a question, a plea, a desperation that didn't need words. "Bring her inside," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the wind. He didn't hesitate. He lifted the woman off the horse with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man his size, and carried her toward the house. Evelyn led the way, throwing open the door, ushering him in. The warmth of the fire hit them all at once, and the contrast made her skin sting. "Put her by the fire," Evelyn said, already moving, already gathering blankets, stoking the flames higher. The man laid the woman down carefully, then stepped back, his hands hovering like he didn't know what to do with them. Evelyn knelt beside the woman, and her heart clenched. She was young, maybe 25, with high cheekbones and skin that should have been warm brown, but was now ashen, tinged with blue at the lips. Her clothes were soaked through, thin fabric that was no match for the cold. She wasn't breathing right. Shallow, uneven gasps that rattled in her chest. "How long has she been like this?" Evelyn asked, unwrapping the woman's wet clothes with quick, practiced hands. "Found her an hour ago," the man said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel underfoot. "She was collapsed by the river, alone." Evelyn didn't ask why. She didn't ask where the woman had come from or what she was doing out in this weather. She just worked. She wrapped the woman in dry blankets, rubbed her hands and feet to get the blood moving, pressed warm cloths to her face. The man stood back, watching, his expression unreadable. "Coffee," Evelyn said, not looking up. "Pots on the stove. Pour 3 cups." He moved without question, and Evelyn found herself grateful for the silence, for the lack of explanation or excuses. He just did what needed doing. She liked that. By the time the woman's breathing steadied, by the time color started to return to her face, Evelyn's own hands were shaking. She sat back on her heels, wiped her forehead, and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The man handed her a cup of coffee, and she took it, their fingers brushing for just a second. His hands were rough, scarred, warm. "She'll be all right," Evelyn said, her voice quieter now. "But she needs rest. And she needs to stay warm." The man nodded. He looked at the woman on the floor, then at Evelyn, and something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but close. Relief, maybe. Gratitude. "Thank you," he said. Evelyn shrugged, took a sip of coffee. Anyone would have done it. "No," he said, and his voice was firm, certain. They wouldn't. She didn't argue. She knew he was right. She'd lived in this town long enough to know that mercy was a luxury most people couldn't afford, or wouldn't. The storm hit in earnest after that, the wind howling against the walls, the snow piling up against the windows. The man didn't leave. Evelyn didn't ask him to. She made more coffee, heated up stew, and they sat in silence while the world outside turned white and wild. The woman slept, her breathing deep, and even now, her body finally warm. "What's your name?" Evelyn asked eventually, breaking the quiet. "Cole," he said. "I'm Evelyn." He nodded, like he already knew. Maybe he did. Small towns had a way of making everyone's business public, whether they wanted it or not. "She your wife?" Evelyn asked, nodding toward the woman. "No," Cole said. "Don't know her. Just found her." Evelyn studied him. He wasn't lying. She could tell. But there was something else there, something he wasn't saying. She let it go. The night stretched on, and eventually Evelyn dozed off in the chair by the fire, the warmth and the exhaustion pulling her under. When she woke, the fire was still going, and Cole was sitting exactly where he'd been before, his eyes on the woman, his hands folded in his lap. He hadn't moved, hadn't slept. "You should rest," Evelyn said, her voice scratchy. "I'm fine," he said. She didn't push. She knew stubborn when she saw it. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world buried in white. The woman woke slowly, her eyes fluttering open, confusion crossing her face. Cole was there immediately, kneeling beside her, speaking in a language Evelyn didn't understand. The woman responded, her voice weak but steady, and Cole's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Evelyn made breakfast, set out plates, and watched as the woman ate slowly, carefully, like she hadn't had a decent meal in days. Cole ate too, though his eyes kept drifting to the window, to the snow, to the horizon. "I need to get her home," he said eventually. Evelyn nodded. "Where's home?" "North," he said. "Reservation." Evelyn's chest tightened. She knew the reservation, knew the people there had their own struggles, their own grief. She also knew that the woman sitting in her house, wrapped in her blankets, drinking her coffee, was someone important. She could see it in the way Cole looked at her, in the careful way he spoke to her. "Take my coat," Evelyn said suddenly, standing, crossing to the hook by the door. She pulled down her heaviest coat, the one lined with fur, the one that had been Thomas's before he died. "She'll need it." Cole stared at her. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Evelyn said, holding it out. "Take it." He hesitated, then took the coat, his fingers brushing hers again. "I'll bring it back," he said. "Don't worry about it," Evelyn said. She meant it. Cole wrapped the woman in the coat, lifted her onto his horse, and swung up behind her. He looked down at Evelyn, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Respect. "Thank you," he said again. Evelyn nodded. "Stay safe." He turned the horse and rode out into the snow. The woman bundled against him, the coat a dark shape against the white. Evelyn watched until they disappeared, then turned back to the house, to the fire, to the silence. She thought that was the end of it. One night, one storm, one act of mercy that would fade into memory like everything else. But the next morning, she stepped outside and froze. Lined up along her fence, stretching as far as she could see, were men. Dozens of them. Maybe 100. Maybe more. Native warriors, silent and still, their faces painted, their weapons at their sides. They didn't move, didn't speak. They just stood there, watching her. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. Fear flooded her veins, cold and sharp. She didn't know what this was, didn't know if she should run or fight or speak. She just stood there, her breath misting in the cold air, her hands shaking. And then she saw him, Cole, riding through the snow, and beside him, another man, younger, lighter, with a smile that reached his eyes. They stopped in front of her, and Cole dismounted, his expression serious. "Don't be afraid," he said. "What is this?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely steady. "Protection," Cole said. "You saved her. The chief's daughter. And now they're here to make sure no harm comes to you." Evelyn stared at him, at the warriors, at the impossible sight in front of her. "For how long?" she whispered. Cole glanced at the other man, who just smiled. "As long as it takes," the younger man said. His voice was warm, easy, nothing like Cole's rough edges. "I'm Jack, by the way." Evelyn didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process this, so she just nodded, her mind spinning, her heart racing. If you were her, standing on that porch, would you trust them? Would you let them stay? The warriors didn't leave, and neither did Cole and Jack. They stayed through the morning, through the afternoon, and when the sun started to set, Evelyn found herself standing in the doorway watching them, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The days that followed were strange in a way Evelyn couldn't quite name. The warriors remained at her fence, a silent wall of protection that made her feel both safer and more exposed than she'd ever been. People from town rode out to see, their faces tight with suspicion, their eyes flicking between her and the men who stood guard. She could feel their judgment, their fear, their anger, but none of them dared to cross the line the warriors had drawn. Cole and Jack stayed too. They slept in the barn at first, refusing her offers of the spare room, insisting they didn't want to impose. But Evelyn saw the way they moved, the way they checked the perimeter, the way their eyes scanned the horizon. They weren't just staying. They were watching, waiting for something. She didn't ask what. She was afraid of the answer. Jack was the one who broke the ice. He had a way about him, easy and open, that made it hard to stay guarded. He helped her with chores, fixed a broken fence post, and talked the whole time, filling the silence with stories about places he'd been, people he'd met. He made her laugh, something she hadn't done in longer than she could remember. Cole was different. He was quiet, watchful, a man who measured his words like they cost him something. But he was there, always, a steady presence that made her feel grounded. He chopped wood without being asked, checked the horses, and sat by the fire at night with a cup of coffee, his eyes distant. One evening, after Jack had gone to bed, Evelyn found herself sitting across from Cole, the fire crackling between them. The silence stretched, comfortable now, and she found herself studying him. The lines around his eyes, the scar on his jaw, the way his hands rested on his knees, scarred and strong. "Why are you really here?" she asked quietly. Cole looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "Told you. To protect you." "But why you?" she pressed. "You could have just brought her home and left." He was quiet for a long time, and she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, rubbed a hand over his face. "Because I know what it's like," he said. "To be alone. To have people look at you like you don't belong." Evelyn's chest tightened. "You're not from around here." "No," he said. "I'm from nowhere, everywhere. Spent my whole life moving, never staying long enough to matter, never thought I'd want to." "What changed?" she asked. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "Met someone who reminded me what it feels like to want to stay." The air between them shifted, grew heavier, charged. Evelyn's pulse quickened, and she looked away, her cheeks warm. She didn't know what to do with this, with him, with the way his words settled inside her like something precious. "Jack seems like a good man," she said, changing the subject. Cole smiled, just a little. "He is. Too good, maybe. Got a heart bigger than his sense." "You two traveled together." "For a while now," Cole said. "Met him in Texas. He was in trouble, and I helped him out. Been riding together ever since." "And you trust him?" "With my life," Cole said simply. Evelyn nodded. She understood that kind of bond, that kind of loyalty. She'd had it once, with Thomas, before he'd left her alone in a world that didn't know what to do with her. The next morning, Jack joined her in the kitchen while she made breakfast. He was all smiles and easy charm, rolling up his sleeves and insisting on helping. She let him, amused by the way he fumbled with the eggs, the way he cursed when he burned his hand on the pan. "You're terrible at this," she said, laughing. "Yeah, well, I have other skills," he said, grinning, "like being devastatingly handsome." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "And modest, too. That's my best quality," he said, and she laughed again, the sound surprising her. Later, as they sat down to eat, Jack leaned back in his chair and studied her. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on what it is," she said. "Why are you out here alone?" The question was casual, but it landed heavy. Evelyn set down her fork, her smile fading. "Because I don't have anywhere else to be." "That's not what I meant," Jack said gently. "I mean, why don't you have anyone? You're kind and strong, and, hell, you're beautiful. So why are you alone?" Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked down at her plate, her hands trembling just a little. "Because people don't know what to do with me," she said quietly. "I'm not enough of one thing, too much of another. My husband's gone, and the life I thought I'd have, it's gone too. So I stay here. I survive, and I try not to think too hard about what I'm missing." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His touch was warm, solid, grounding. "You're not missing anything," he said. "You're just waiting for the right people to see you." Her eyes stung, and she blinked hard, pulling her hand away. "Don't," she said, her voice rough. "Don't be kind to me. I don't know what to do with it." "Then learn," Jack said, his voice soft. "Because you deserve it." She didn't answer. She couldn't. She just stood and cleared the plates, her hands shaking, her heart racing. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about Jack's words, about Cole's quiet presence, about the warriors outside, standing guard over a woman they didn't know, protecting her because she'd shown mercy to someone who needed it. And she realized with a sharp, aching clarity that she wasn't alone anymore. And she didn't know if that terrified her or saved her. The trouble started 3 days later. A man from town rode out, his face hard, his eyes cold. He stopped at the fence, staring at the warriors, then at Evelyn as she stepped onto the porch. "You need to send them away," he said. His name was Garrett, and he owned half the town, including the bank that held the note on her land. "They're not hurting anyone," Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. "They're scaring people," Garrett said. "And people who are scared do stupid things. Send them away, or I'll find a way to make you." Cole appeared beside her, silent and menacing, and Garrett's horse skittered back. Jack stepped out of the barn, his hand resting on the gun at his hip, his easy smile gone. "She said no," Cole said, his voice low and dangerous. Garrett's face flushed red. "You don't belong here. None of you do." "Neither do you," Jack said. "So why don't you ride back to town and mind your own business?" Garrett stared at them, his jaw tight. Then he spurred his horse and rode off, kicking up snow as he went. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "He'll be back," she said quietly. "Let him," Cole said. "We'll be ready." And as she looked at him, at Jack, at the warriors still standing silent and strong at her fence, she believed him. For the first time in years, she believed she might actually be safe. But safety, she was learning, came with a price, and she wasn't sure she was ready to pay it. The nights grew colder, and the closeness grew warmer. Cole and Jack moved into the house after a particularly brutal storm, left the barn half collapsed, and the animals huddled together for warmth. Evelyn didn't protest. She told herself it was practical, that it made sense, but the truth was something else entirely. The truth was that she liked having them there. Liked the sound of their voices, the weight of their presence, the way the house felt less empty. Jack slept in the spare room, the one that had been Thomas's office, and Cole took the couch by the fire, insisting he didn't need more. Evelyn tried not to think about how close he was, just a wall and a few feet of space between them. Tried not to think about the way her heart sped up when she heard him moving in the dark, stoking the fire, keeping watch. One night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside, and finally gave up. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and padded out into the main room. Cole was awake, sitting by the fire, a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked up when she appeared, and something flickered in his eyes. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "You? Don't sleep much," he admitted. "Never have." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the fire. Because the nightmares don't wait for you to be ready. Evelyn's chest ached. She understood that. Understood the way the past could creep up on you in the dark, whispering things you didn't want to hear. "What do you dream about?" she asked softly. "Things I've done," he said. "Things I couldn't stop. People I couldn't save." "You saved her," Evelyn said. "The chief's daughter." "Almost didn't," Cole said. "Almost rode past. Almost decided it wasn't my problem." "But you didn't," Evelyn said. "You stopped. You cared. That counts for something." He looked at her then, and the firelight caught in his eyes, made them glow. "You stopped too," he said. "When you didn't have to. When it would have been easier to turn us away." "I couldn't," she said simply. "I know what it's like to be left out in the cold." "So do I," Cole said, and the weight in his voice told her he meant it in more ways than one. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, and Evelyn felt something shift, something fragile and tentative, like the first thaw after a long winter. She wanted to reach out, to touch him, to close the distance between them, but she didn't. She just sat there, letting the warmth of the fire and his presence wrap around her like a second blanket. "Evelyn," Cole said quietly, and the way he said her name made her breath catch. "If I'm making you uncomfortable—" "You're not," she said quickly. "You're not. I'm not used to this, to people staying." "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and it sounded like a promise. Her throat tightened and she nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After a moment she stood, her blanket slipping from her shoulders. Cole stood too, and they were closer now, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of smoke and leather and something uniquely him. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night," he said, his voice rough. She turned and walked back to her room, her heart pounding, her skin tingling. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers up, but she didn't sleep. She just lay there, thinking about the way he'd looked at her, the way his voice had sounded when he'd said her name, and she wondered what it would feel like to stop being afraid, to stop being alone. Jack was different with her. Where Cole was quiet and intense, Jack was light and easy, full of laughter and stories. He teased her, made her smile, and somehow managed to coax her out of the shell she'd built around herself. One afternoon, while they were mending a fence, he started singing, his voice surprisingly good, and she found herself humming along. "You have a nice voice," he said, grinning at her. "I don't sing," she said, shaking her head. "Well, you just did," he said, "and it was beautiful." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "You're full of it, you know that?" "Yeah," he said, his grin widening, "but you like me anyway." She didn't deny it. She did like him, liked the way he made her feel lighter, like the weight she'd been carrying for so long wasn't quite so heavy. He had a way of making her forget, just for a little while, that she was supposed to be alone. That night, after dinner, Jack convinced her to play cards. Cole watched from the couch, a faint smile on his face as Jack dealt the cards and explained the rules with exaggerated seriousness. Evelyn won the first hand, and Jack accused her of cheating, which made her laugh so hard she couldn't breathe. "I didn't cheat," she said, wiping her eyes. "You're just terrible at this." "Slander," Jack said, clutching his chest. "Cole, tell her I'm not terrible." "You're terrible," Cole said, and even he was smiling now. They played until late, the fire burning low, the room warm and comfortable, and when Evelyn finally went to bed, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt happy, content, like maybe, just maybe, she could have this, not forever, maybe, but for now. And for now was enough. But the world outside her little bubble wasn't as kind. Garrett came back, this time with men. They didn't cross the fence, didn't confront the warriors, but they made their presence known. They rode past, slow and deliberate, their eyes hard. Evelyn watched from the porch, her stomach twisting, and Cole and Jack stood on either side of her, their hands on their guns. "They're testing us," Cole said quietly. "What do we do?" Evelyn asked. "We wait," Cole said, "and we make sure they know we're not backing down." The warriors didn't move, didn't react. They just stood there, silent and immovable, and eventually Garrett and his men rode away. But the threat lingered, heavy and oppressive, like a storm waiting to break. That night, Evelyn couldn't shake the fear. She sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, and Cole sat beside her, his presence a quiet comfort. "They're going to come back," she said. "I know," Cole said. "And when they do, we'll be ready," he said. He turned to her, his eyes serious. "I won't let them hurt you, Evelyn. I promise." She believed him, and that terrified her more than anything. Because believing him meant trusting him, and trusting him meant letting him in, and letting him in meant risking everything. But as she sat there, with Cole beside her and Jack humming in the kitchen, she realized she was already in too deep. She'd already let them in. And now there was no going back. The storm that had been brewing finally broke on a night when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds and the wind carried the scent of snow. Evelyn was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when she heard the shout. It was distant but sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. She froze, her hands still in the dishwater. And then Cole was there, moving fast, his face grim. "Stay inside," he said, his voice clipped. "What's happening?" she asked, but he was already gone, Jack right behind him. She dried her hands and followed them to the window, her heart hammering. Outside, the warriors were moving, no longer still, but forming a line, their weapons drawn. And beyond them, in the dark, she could see lights, torches, maybe 20 or 30 of them, bobbing in the night like angry fireflies. Garrett had come back, and he'd brought an army. Evelyn's breath caught. She wanted to run outside to stop this, but her legs felt rooted to the floor. She watched as Cole and Jack stepped out onto the porch, their figures silhouetted against the firelight inside the house. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, and even from here she could feel their resolve. One of Garrett's men rode forward, his voice carrying over the wind. "Send them away," he shouted, "the savages and the drifters. Send them away or we'll burn you out." Cole didn't respond. He just stood there, his hand resting on his gun, his eyes fixed on the man. Jack shifted beside him, his posture loose but ready, and Evelyn knew with a cold certainty that if this went bad, blood would be spilled. "You've got till dawn," the man shouted. Then he turned his horse and rode back to the others, and the torches retreated into the dark, leaving only the wind and the silence. Evelyn stumbled back from the window, her hands shaking. Cole and Jack came back inside, and she looked at them, her eyes wide. "They're going to kill us," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "No," Cole said firmly, "they're not." "You don't know that," she said, her voice rising. "You don't know what they're capable of." "Yes, I do," Cole said, stepping closer. "I've seen men like Garrett before. They're bullies. They rely on fear, and they back down when someone stands up to them." "But what if they don't?" Evelyn asked, her eyes stinging. "What if they come back and they burn this place down and then we fight?" Jack said, his voice steady. "But it won't come to that. We won't let it." Evelyn shook her head, her chest tight. "You should go," she said. "Both of you. You should leave before they come back, before this gets worse." "No," Cole said, and his voice was hard, unyielding. "Cole." "No," he said again, and he took her hands, his grip firm but gentle. "I'm not leaving you. Neither is Jack. We made a choice to stay, and we're staying." "You don't owe me anything," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I do," Cole said, and his eyes were fierce, burning with something she couldn't name. "You gave us a place when we had nowhere to go. You trusted us when you had no reason to, and I'll be damned if I let anyone hurt you for that." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she pulled her hands free, turning away. "I can't lose anyone else," she whispered. "I can't." "You won't," Jack said, stepping closer. "We're not Thomas, Evelyn. We're not going to leave you alone." She looked at him, then at Cole, and the weight of their words settled over her like a blanket. She wanted to believe them. God, she wanted to believe them, but belief was a luxury she couldn't afford, not anymore. "I need to check on the animals," she said, her voice shaking. "I need to—" "I'll do it," Jack said gently. "You stay here. Rest." She nodded, too tired to argue, and Jack slipped out into the dark. Cole stayed, his eyes on her, and after a moment he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, startled, but then she melted against him, her hands clutching his shirt, her face pressed to his chest. He smelled like smoke and leather and something warm, something safe, and she let herself have this, just for a moment. Let herself feel held. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." And for the first time, in a long time, she believed it. The night passed slowly, every sound making her jump, every shadow outside the window a potential threat. But dawn came, cold and grey, and Garrett's men didn't return. The warriors remained at the fence, silent and watchful, and Cole and Jack moved through the day with a quiet efficiency, checking the perimeter, reinforcing the barn, preparing for whatever came next. Evelyn tried to help, but her hands were clumsy, her mind elsewhere. She kept thinking about what Cole had said, about the way he'd held her, about the way Jack had looked at her with such gentle certainty. She kept thinking about the fact that, for the first time in years, she wasn't facing the world alone. That afternoon, one of the warriors approached the house. He was older, his face lined with age and wisdom, and he spoke to Cole in a language Evelyn didn't understand. Cole listened, nodded, then turned to her. "The chief wants to meet you," he said. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Why?" "To thank you," Cole said, "and to make sure you understand what his protection means." "I don't need to meet him," she said quickly. "I don't need—" "Yes, you do," Cole said, his voice gentle but firm. "He's offering you something most people never get. Respect, safety. You need to accept it." She wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew he was right. So she nodded, swallowed her fear, and followed Cole and Jack as they walked out to the fence. The chief was waiting on the other side, flanked by his warriors. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to see right through her. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, and Cole translated. "He says you saved his daughter's life, and for that, he is in your debt." Evelyn shook her head. "I don't want a debt. I just did what anyone would do." Cole translated, and the chief's expression softened. He spoke again, and Cole's voice was quiet as he relayed the words. "He says that's why you deserve his protection, because you gave without expecting anything in return, and that is a rare thing." Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked at the chief, at the warriors, at the impossible gift they were offering her, and she didn't know what to say. So she just nodded, her eyes stinging, and the chief nodded back. Then he turned and walked away, and the warriors resumed their posts, and Evelyn stood there, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "You okay?" Jack asked, his hand on her shoulder. "I don't know," she admitted. "Come on," he said, steering her back toward the house. "Let's get you inside." That night, as they sat around the fire, Evelyn found herself watching Cole and Jack, really watching them. The way they moved around each other, easy and familiar, like they'd been doing this for years. The way Jack teased Cole, and Cole rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. The way they both looked at her, like she was something worth protecting. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Anything," Jack said. "Why are you really here? I mean, I know you said it's to protect me, but why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Jack and Cole exchanged a look, and then Jack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Because you reminded us of something we'd forgotten," he said. "That there are still good people in the world, people worth fighting for. And because," Cole added, his voice quiet, "we're tired of running, tired of being alone. And maybe we thought you were too." Evelyn's breath caught. She looked at them, at the honesty in their faces, and something inside her broke open. Not in a painful way, but in a way that let the light in. "I am," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being alone." "Then don't be," Jack said simply. "Let us stay. Let us help. Let us be here." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears, and Cole reached out, took her hand. His touch was warm, grounding, and she held on tight, like he was the only thing keeping her from drifting away. "Okay," she said. "Okay." And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. The days that followed were strange and wonderful. Cole and Jack stayed close, their presence a constant comfort, and Evelyn found herself opening up in ways she hadn't thought possible. She told them about Thomas, about the loneliness, about the way the town had turned its back on her, and they listened, really listened, without judgment or pity. Jack told her about his family, about the farm he'd grown up on, and the brother he'd lost to fever when he was 12. He told her about the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd hurt, and the way he'd been trying to make up for it ever since. Cole told her less, but what he did share was raw and real. He told her about a war he'd fought in, about the things he'd done, the lives he'd taken. He told her about the guilt that followed him, the nightmares that never quite went away. And he told her that being here with her was the first time in years he'd felt like he might deserve a second chance. "You do," she said, her voice fierce. "You both do." And she meant it. Because if anyone deserved a second chance, it was them. And maybe, just maybe, it was her too. One evening, after the chores were done and the fire was burning low, Jack pulled out a harmonica and started to play. The music was soft and sweet, filling the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Evelyn found herself swaying, and Jack grinned, stood up, and held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "I don't dance," she said, shaking her head. "Sure you do," he said, pulling her to her feet. "Everyone dances." She laughed, but she let him lead her, his hand on her waist, his other hand holding hers. They moved slowly, awkwardly at first, and then the rhythm found them, and she forgot to be self-conscious. She forgot to be afraid. She just danced, with Jack's laughter in her ear and Cole watching from the couch, a small smile on his face. When the song ended, Jack spun her one last time, and she stumbled into him, breathless and laughing. He caught her, his arms around her, and for a moment they just stood there, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. "You're beautiful," he said softly. Her breath caught. "Jack, I mean it," he said. "You're beautiful and strong, and you deserve to know that." She pulled back, her cheeks warm, her heart racing. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said, his smile gentle. "Just believe it." She looked at Cole, who was still watching, and he nodded, like he agreed with every word. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worth something. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the way Jack had looked at her, the way Cole had held her, the way they both made her feel seen, valued, wanted. And she realized with a sharp, aching clarity that she was falling, for both of them, and she didn't know what to do about it. But as sleep pulled her under, she decided that maybe she didn't have to do anything. Maybe she could just let it happen, let herself feel, let herself hope, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The threat from Garrett didn't disappear, but it changed. Instead of open confrontation, he started a quieter war. He spread rumors in town, told people that Evelyn was harboring criminals, that the warriors were a danger, that something needed to be done. Supplies became harder to get. People who'd once traded with her stopped coming by. The isolation that had always been a part of her life became sharper, more deliberate. But she wasn't alone anymore. Cole and Jack made sure of that. They rode into town when she needed supplies, faced down the whispers and the stares, and came back with everything she needed. The warriors remained at the fence, a silent but powerful reminder that Evelyn was under their protection. And slowly, grudgingly, the town started to back off. One afternoon, a woman from the reservation came to the fence. She was young, with kind eyes, and she carried a basket. The warriors let her through, and Evelyn met her at the porch, curious and a little wary. "I'm Sarah," the woman said. "The chief sent me to thank you." "You don't have to—" Evelyn started, but Sarah shook her head. "Yes, we do," she said. She held out the basket and Evelyn took it, peering inside. It was filled with bread, dried meat, beadwork, small gifts that spoke of care and gratitude. "You saved my sister," Sarah said, "and for that, we are grateful." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I'm just glad she's okay." "She is," Sarah said, "because of you." She hesitated, then added, "The chief wanted me to tell you something. He said that you are one of us now, not by blood, but by choice. And that means you will always have a home with us." Evelyn didn't know what to say. She just stood there, the basket in her hands, her eyes stinging, and Sarah smiled, touched her arm gently, and then turned and walked away. That night, Evelyn showed Cole and Jack the basket, and they looked at the gifts with quiet reverence. "You've been given something rare," Cole said. "Don't take it lightly." "I won't," Evelyn said, and she meant it. But the peace didn't last. A week later, one of the warriors was found dead, shot in the back while he stood watch. The others brought his body to the house, and Evelyn stood on the porch, her heart breaking as she watched them lay him down with care and respect. The chief came, his face carved from stone, and he spoke to Cole in their shared language. Cole's jaw tightened and he nodded. "What did he say?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaking. "He said this is war now," Cole said quietly, "and he's going to find out who did this." "It was Garrett," Evelyn said. "It had to be." "Probably," Cole said. "But we need proof." "Then let's get it," Jack said, his voice hard. That night, Cole and Jack rode out, and Evelyn waited, pacing the floor, her stomach in knots. They came back just before dawn, their faces grim. "It was Garrett's men," Cole said. "We found them bragging about it in the saloon. They said it was a warning, that there'd be more if you didn't send the warriors away." Evelyn's hands shook. "What do we do?" "We end this," Jack said, "before anyone else gets hurt." "How?" she asked. Cole looked at her, his eyes steady. "We make them understand that you're not alone, that if they come for you, they'll have to go through all of us." The next day, Cole and Jack rode into town with a message. They went to Garrett's office, walked in without knocking, and laid it out plain. If Garrett or his men came near Evelyn or her land again, the warriors would retaliate, and Cole and Jack would be right there with them. Garrett laughed at first, but the laughter died when he saw the look in Cole's eyes, when he realized that this wasn't a bluff, that these men and the warriors behind them would burn his world down if he didn't back off. "You're making a mistake," Garrett said. "No," Cole said. "You are." They left him sitting there, his face pale, his hands shaking, and when they got back to the ranch, Evelyn was waiting, her eyes wide. "What happened?" she asked. "It's over," Jack said. "He won't bother you again." "How do you know?" she asked. "Because he knows what it'll cost him," Cole said, "and he's not willing to pay it." Evelyn let out a breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank us yet," Jack said. "He might still try something. But we'll be ready." And they were. For days they stayed on high alert, watching the horizon, checking the perimeter. But Garrett didn't come. The town stayed quiet, and slowly, carefully, Evelyn started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real, that she was safe, that she had people who would fight for her. One night, as they sat around the fire, Cole looked at her, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Okay," Evelyn said, her heart speeding up. "I'm not good at this," he said, "at talking, at feelings, but I need you to know that being here with you, it's changed me. You've changed me, and I don't want to leave." Evelyn's breath caught. "Cole, let me finish," he said. "I know I'm not easy. I know I've got a past that's uglier than most, but if you'll have me, if you'll let me stay, I'll spend every day proving that I'm worth it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. "You already have." He reached out, cupped her face in his hand, and she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly. "Have been since the moment I saw you." "I'm falling for you too," she whispered, and it was the truth, the honest, terrifying, beautiful truth. Jack cleared his throat and they both looked at him. He was smiling, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "I don't want to leave either," he said. "And I know this is complicated, but I care about you, Evelyn, a lot, and I think there's room here for all of us." Evelyn looked between them, her heart pounding. She should have been scared, should have been confused, but all she felt was a deep, overwhelming certainty. "I think so too," she said softly. And that night, something shifted, something settled. They didn't rush, didn't push. They just sat together, the three of them, and let the quiet understanding grow. Let the possibility of something new, something unconventional, something real take root. And when Evelyn finally went to bed, she felt lighter than she had in years. Like the weight she'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Like she could breathe again. The weeks that followed were filled with small moments of grace. Cole taught her how to fix the wagon wheel she'd been struggling with for months. Jack made her laugh until her sides hurt, told her stories that made her forget her worries. And together, the three of them built something that felt like home. The warriors eventually left, called back to the reservation, but the chief made it clear that Evelyn was still under their protection, that if she ever needed them, they would come. And she believed it, because she'd seen what loyalty looked like, what honor looked like, and it was beautiful. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Evelyn stood on the porch, with Cole and Jack on either side of her. The land stretched out before them, vast and wild and full of possibility. "I never thought I'd have this," she said quietly. "A home, people who care, a future." "You deserve it," Cole said, his hand finding hers. "We all do," Jack added, his arm around her shoulders. And as they stood there, watching the sun sink below the horizon, Evelyn realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, really, truly living. And it was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. The ranch became a place of healing over the next months. The scars that Evelyn had carried for so long started to fade, not because they disappeared, but because she learned to live with them. Cole and Jack were patient, never pushing her, never demanding more than she could give. They let her set the pace, let her decide when to open up, when to pull back, and slowly, carefully, she let them in. There were hard days, of course, days when the grief of losing Thomas hit her like a wave, when the loneliness she'd lived with for so long came creeping back. But on those days, Cole was there, solid and steady, holding her without words, and Jack was there, making her laugh even when she didn't want to, reminding her that joy was still possible. They worked the land together, fixed fences and mended roofs, and built something that felt permanent. The town eventually came around, grudgingly accepting that Evelyn wasn't going anywhere, and that the men who stood beside her weren't leaving either. Garrett never came back, and the rumors faded, replaced by a cautious respect. One spring morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of birdsong and the smell of coffee. She dressed and walked out to the kitchen, where Jack was flipping pancakes and Cole was reading a newspaper he'd picked up in town. They looked up when she entered, and both of them smiled, and she felt her heart swell. "Morning," Jack said, handing her a cup of coffee. "Morning," she said, settling into her chair. "Sleep okay?" Cole asked. "Better than I have in years," she admitted. And it was true, because for the first time in a long time she felt safe, felt loved, felt like she belonged. Later that day, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Cole took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" she asked. "About the future," he said. "About staying here, permanently." Evelyn's heart skipped. "You want to stay?" "I do," he said, "if you'll have me." "I will," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will." Jack grinned, leaned over and kissed her cheek. "Good," he said, "because I'm not going anywhere either." And as they sat there, the three of them together, watching the sun paint the sky in colors too beautiful to name, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt whole, complete, like all the broken pieces of her life had finally come together to make something new. "I love you," she said quietly, looking at both of them. "Both of you." "We love you too," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "Always," Jack added, his hand finding hers. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself feel it, let herself believe it, let herself hope for a future that was bright and full of promise. Because she wasn't alone anymore. She had a home. She had love. She had everything she'd ever wanted, and more than she'd ever dreamed, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. If this story found a place in your heart, there are many more nights beneath these western skies, many more tales of women who found strength they didn't know they had, and love they never thought they'd find. Stay close.